Hezbollah uses civilian population and civilian homes as a human shield.
Israel's war is not with you. It's with Hezbollah.
Don't you find these statements too familiar and old? But here's the reality. These words were delivered just yesterday, while Israeli forces launched intense bombardments on southern Lebanon, killing over 492 people, injuring thousands, and displacing millions. If you're familiar with Israel's long-standing propaganda and warmongering rhetoric, you'll recognize this as the same old playbook. Israel shamelessly continues to repeat these lines, just as they did when attacking Gaza after October 7th.
Israel is fighting Hamas terrorists, not the Palestinian population, by using Palestinian civilians as human shields. Hamas uses civilians as human shields.
On January 26th, Netanyahu reassured the world that he would do his utmost to avoid harming civilians.
We will continue to facilitate humanitarian assistance and to do our utmost to keep civilians out of harm's way.
Now, with the IDF and Netanyahu calling for Lebanese civilians to evacuate, the familiar script plays out.
Starting this morning, the IDF has warned you to get out of harm's way. I urge you, take this warning seriously.
We ask residents of Lebanese villages to pay attention to the message and warning published by the IDF and heed them.
If you followed the war in Gaza, you'll remember Israel used the same tactics, asking Gazans to evacuate before turning entire regions into rubble.
The IDF urges Palestinian civilians to leave war zones by disseminating leaflets, making phone calls, providing safe passage corridors.
Mr. Netanyahu said that he would provide safe passage to civilians before launching attacks that killed thousands in Rafah.
Our soldiers are now in Khan Yunis, Hamas's main stronghold. They'll soon go into Rafah, Hamas's last bastion. They will do so, as they've done up to now, by providing the civilian population safe passage to safe zones.
But you know how it turned out. We don't need to remind you. Israel has killed 41,000 people in Gaza, displaced millions, and the whole region is facing a lack of food and hunger. It's been almost a year, and Israel's army is still on the ground. During that time, Israel has killed hundreds of journalists and demolished schools and hospitals, accusing them of assisting Hamas. Meanwhile, much of the Western media stayed disturbingly silent, continuing to offer justifications for Israel's actions from Israel's playbook.
They're entitled to defend themselves with force.
Okay, excellent. Then we stand as one with you, with Israel.
Palestinians aren't killed by Israeli bombs. They die. Israelis, however, are killed.
Here's the irony. When Israeli civilians face similar suffering in retaliatory attacks, Israel quickly shifts into the role of the victim, justifying the killing of civilians under the pretext of fighting terrorism.
In the last week alone, Hezbollah fired over 700 rockets, missiles, UAVs, hitting homes deep inside Israel and forcing hundreds of thousands of Israelis into bomb shelters.
This happened after thousands of pagers exploded in Beirut, wounding thousands and killing dozens. Hezbollah blames Israel for that, while Israel remained silent on this publicly as its usual pattern. So far, Israel has hit at least 1,300 targets in Lebanon, which caused fires across the country at several locations.
The IDF strike 1,300 targets until now, including long-range cruise missiles, heavyweight rocket with 1,000-kilo warhead.
And these are the visuals from Lebanese roads as people are trying to flee their homes in fear of Israeli attacks. Israel often touts itself as the only democratic nation in the Middle East, enjoying a special status globally because of this claim. However, this so-called democracy silences dissent, shuts down media outlets, relentlessly kills journalists, and has even banned foreign reporters from covering its extensive war on Gaza. Many analysts argue that Netanyahu initiated the war in Lebanon due to his failures in Gaza.
They have failed in Gaza. He stated 3 goals.
Gideon Levy, a columnist for Israeli newspaper Haaretz, notes that Israel justifies its assault on Lebanon as a means to secure the return of 60,000 displaced people to northern Israel. But this could have been achieved through a deal if Israel had agreed to a ceasefire in Gaza.